Welcome to the Carpentry Show on Fix Radio. I'm Robin Clevett with you. I've been trying to get well-known carpenter Gary Banks on my show for ages, and I'm finally privileged enough to talk to him here today at Festool in Bury St Edmunds. Gary has been on an amazing and varied journey through our trade and shares his story this afternoon. I hope you enjoy the show. Gary, you've been in the trade for more than 20 years. Where did your journey begin?
Well, my journey began very young. I was quite a creative sort of, I'd loved Lego. I used to build loads of Lego stuff. And I mentioned before, my dad sort of got me into the sort of carpentry, woodworking stuff. He wasn't a carpenter himself. So I just loved building little wooden boats, I think my first project was a tree house. I built in a garden. It was probably nails sticking all over the place, but I just felt like I enjoyed that side. So I think that was my first sort of insight to working.
It's funny, isn't it? It's kind of like you sort of, when you mentioned the word, I made something like that. I made a tree house. It was very normal, wasn't it? Back in the day, get outside and make a tree house. Now I think it's let's stay inside and play the Xbox or something like that. So it's it's amazing. It sounds so old-fashioned, but what a wonderful thing to have done. So how did you learn your craft?
So I went for like a work experience with school when I was age 14. I went to a joinery shop. There was two old-fashioned guys. I think they're both names were Ernie. So it's really bizarre. There was like an Ernie Junior and an Ernie Senior. Proper old school joiners. It was like under an archway under a rail station, and it was brilliant. Like it was my first real experience, like doing melamine and sort of like all these wooden carcasses. We'd done like an office fit out. It was like I had a really good experience of being in the workshop as well as them taking me out on site to do the actual fit of it. So I knew I loved it. I knew loved carpentry, but this was just an insight. And I was quite lucky that my mum, one of her best friends, husband was in the industry. He's working for like a big carpentry company, and he always said he'd give me an apprenticeship. So the work experience, as well as knowing that I could get a job in carpentry, sort of like set out my path.
So how old were you when you actually started your apprenticeship?
So I was 16. I was literally. I can remember the first day turning up, absolutely petrified, turning up on my bike. And it was lucky because I was working local area called Chingford, because I was actually from Walthamstow, and it's a big housing association. So it was like 50, houses to be built. So there was no pressures to get things done. So I could learn the first and second fit carpentry,
Which is something I didn't know about you. I've always imagined, because I've only ever really known you from socials, and we've met obviously in the past, but I've always imagined that you've not been out on site, but clearly you started your time out on site, and I think you'll probably elaborate on this later, but you learn a lot from that, don't you? Especially about tolerances and measuring and setting out and all that sort of stuff. So what inspired you and kept you sort of learning, passionate and progressing through the trade?
The thing is, like I said, I had a big experience of like different jobs. I can remember being on site and it was cold, I was doing some really horrible stuff, but I knew that just wasn't carpentry. I knew there's more out there because I was doing a lot of projects with my friends. I remember building DJ stands and stuff like this. So I knew carpentry just wasn't cutting a sheet of ply down in the rain. So I think once I progressed my sort of, my woodworking skills, I was then allowed to do more, harder jobs sort of thing. So, I just progressed in that area sort of thing. But I actually got to a point in the company I was working for. I think I outgrew them because there was only so far we could go with this company, because they used to subcontract a lot of the carpenters in. So I was 18 years old, and I was being a bit of not a naughty boy, but I was not fully set on just carpentry. So I was having a lot of time off work and stuff. So they actually set me up with another carpentry company who I still speak to now. And this was 25 years ago. So and then that's when I started learning more second fix, going into cabinetry, but not so much cabinetry. So there's like I say a big scope of work to do. So
well, it sounds like you've had, and I know you've sort of had a pretty varied career. I mean, you must have a seriously versatile skill set as a result of that. So walk us through some of the roles you've had on site. So you talked about learning your first and second fix, then going off to this other carpentry firm, and where you've worked over the years.
So I was quite lucky. When I met my wife, which is 19 years ago yesterday, I actually moved over to Egham, and I was working in a place called Sunningdale, which is where
big houses.
Big houses. Like it was an old diamond factory. So I found this company, started working with them, and I turned up in this house, and it was just like it's apartments. It was absolutely crazy work. I learned, you know, it's the first time I actually done proper joinery. It was like a huge insight to, you know, like I knew carpentry, and it was like, wow, look at this world of joinery. And they taught me so much. And again, I'm still in contact with them. I speak to them all the time. And it's just, yeah, it's just mind blowing that I've taken on all their techniques to
And
this
so
day
the
now.
diamond factory was now a joinery.
No, it's a diamond factory. Sorry, it was where Cliff Richard was living there. So it was basically 35 apartments. They turned into all these different apartments, but I was literally doing all the wardrobes, all fancy furniture.
So you were fitting out brand new luxury builds.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, there are some amazing houses around there. So what are some of the stories and standout projects or sort of memories you have from those times?
But the thing is, it's really difficult because a lot of these people make us sign NDAs. Like, can't always talk about certain people and certain jobs like that. So, you know, I can say that I've, you know, worked for a few footballers, celebrities and stuff like that. Not always the happiest times of my life, because obviously a lot of stress, which we could go into. It's like, I find like the most glamorous jobs come with the price tag of a more stressful life. The easier jobs I prefer nowadays.
Well, we'll touch a little bit more on that later in the show, but when did you realise you had found like your specialism in creating and fitting bespoke furniture?
It was definitely, like say, around about that time I was working for that company, but weirdly is when I started doing the Instagram, the Facebook stuff. It's almost like it was like a gallery of what you're doing, so that before there was no really, you could tell people, you could come out and say, oh mum, I built this, oh great son, that's really nice. But I think this, having the social media side now, you get the valuation, like I can't say the word, but you get the feedback from people, and it makes you feel good. And you know, Instagram and social media have their good things and their bad things, but I thrived off what people thought of my work, sort of thing.
You were a bit of a pioneer when it comes to Instagram. As I said, I've mentioned you face to face before. You were one of the first accounts sort of I saw that came into my feed when I opened Instagram for the first time some years ago. And I remember thinking, wow, you know, I think you certainly got it. And I mean, there's not really a rule book for Instagram. I know people try to make there's a rule book which way to go, but I think it was just the visual pictures were great. I think you just knew what to post, and I just think it told a story, even if it was just one picture, whether it was a beautiful door or a bank of wardrobes or something on a bench. And I think that's really important. So that must have helped bring sort of work in. So what steps did you sort of take when you set up as Banks Carpentry and Joinery to begin to bring that work in, other than Instagram?
So I think my main steps were, like, obviously, you know, you're meeting these people, you're going into the house, be polite, you know, understand what they want, because it's not worth forcing something down their throat like they don't actually want. To listen to the client, you know, and being polite, and you know, every approach you do, just do it properly, do it for yourself. You know, say if I'm drawing, if I'm pricing, you know, think about each job in front of you and just do the best you can, because obviously some of these people, like, they might have saved up for 10 years to buy their wardrobes, and they don't want it lashed in. So you've got to look at it as every job, and like just be, you know, super proud and positive for every job in front of you.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that. And I mean, often I know tradespeople who've never had to advertise before, because you know, we were in a short supply, so the work will find us, or they've got a nice big client base who keeps coming back to them. And often they'll see the effort that I put in with my customers if they're working on my job, for example, and they say, oh, I couldn't be dealing with all that aggravation. They see it as aggravation, but actually you need to provide a service. If you can provide a service, you can add value. Potentially your work is worth a bit more. It can sort of set you apart, create a service. Harry, you mentioned that you've done a little bit of work for well-known people, the odd football player and that sort of stuff. So what are some of the projects you work on as Banks Carpentry and Joinery?
So I do a lot of fitted furniture, wardrobes, cinema rooms, offices, studies and stuff like that. All fairly large projects, and not just a case of just doing a 1 metre wardrobe, but it takes a lot of planning to do some of this stuff. You know, a lot of money's involved in terms of not just what they're potentially paying me, but in terms of material layout and stuff like that. So everything has to be done.
I mean, it's funny though, isn't it? Because I mean, the customers don't know what you know, one sheet of material to the next one. I know they probably show you a picture and say, well, my friends have got this one. You go, oh, that looks like so and so board, and it looks like it's a veneer, and it's got oil on it or something like that. You've got to kind of like prescribe to them or give them samples, and basically, or they might hopefully say, that one you did there on Instagram, we want that one. That's the ideal scenario. Go away and build it. Here's the budget or whatever. So who else do you work with and why?
So it's quite, you know, there's not a big group. It's only me and my mate, me and my colleague Chris, and we use I outsource a spraying, because spraying is another level. Because obviously I do have some sort of OCD when it comes to finishing, and I feel like my joinery was better than my spraying, so I'm better off doing the joinery rather than the spraying. So I sub my spraying out, but I do all the internal stuff. Me and my colleague Chris. So.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think if you try to become all things to all men, it's quite difficult because while someone's doing that spraying, you could be getting the next job ready. So there's a good flow of work, and it's what you enjoy doing effectively. And if you are, and I know you are, particularly good at finish. I mean, people come to you because it's not mass market. People come to you because it has got that level of finish, or that it's going to go the extra mile. What's your workshop? And before I ask you this, anyone who's seen your socials will know that you have got the biggest wall of sustainers. Okay, it's like your backdrop. And now I want to ask you before I ask my next question: are they all full up? Is there something in every sustainer?
Will that be giving it away? I've actually limited. I've put some above. I call it in the Festool graveyard. They're not a graveyard because they're still alive, but some are very rare. They're almost, some of these sustainers are actually worth more than the tools.
Are they?
So yeah, so I like to do it as a visual thing. So I like to walk into the workshop and go, oh, love it here. So it's like a wallpaper for me. So I'd say half of the top stack are empty. So but they're the limited edition ones for me to look at.
So we've cleared that up. Now come on to the setup. What's the setup in your workshop?
It's quite small. We have two large machines. We have the big panel saw, we have the edge pan, and I have the bench area with the sustainers in the background. And I've almost adapted myself to, some people message say, well, why haven't you got this tool, why haven't you got that? Because I don't necessarily need it. Over the years, use the machines I actually need, sort of thing. Like I am in the market now buying a planer fixer, but not a huge machine, just because I'm going to start going into a bit more furniture side. So I just design my work around what space I got. Even with it, a lot of my work would be domestic, in small tight rows. So my van has to be a certain size so I can get it into the house. So everything from the van to the workshop is all designed about what I can actually do and what I can achieve, and whether I can get it in the house or whether I can fit it in the workshop.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that, isn't it? I mean, it's lovely to have the idea of space, but space is so expensive. Not only is space expensive, energy costs are expensive, rates are expensive, insurance is expensive. So it's quite wise, isn't it, to keep yourself quite tight and be disciplined about it as well. And so you're going to get a planer fixer for solid stuff. So we're going to be playing down solid materials and that sort of stuff. Okay, so what other tools? Well, before I say this, you're kind of Festool man. We all know that you're a Festool man, and seeing you here in Festool HQ, it's almost like you're part of the furniture. So what are your tools or the equipment that you really love working with?
Well, it's pretty evident. I use the Shaper Origin, which obviously the topic of CNC today. That is my go-to machine. And some people say, oh, why don't you get a CNC machine? If you understood how much joy this little machine, I can remember when it was released. Well, it came out in prototype probably about 5 years ago. And I see it, and I was like, my wife actually purchased it for me when it came out, but she said to me, you don't need that, it's just going to be like a gimmick. And in my head I thought, maybe it is going to be a gimmick, but it's probably one of the most used tools, apart from, I've got my Festool stuff, but this thing I've used it twice this week on 2 different handles, solid handles. So it's one of them machines that's consistently been used in my workshop. But until you've actually used this machine, you're going to sort of be doubtful, and I think we've even spoken about this. So you can actually see it.
Yeah, so. I've seen it in the flesh. I saw you at Materials and Finishes show, talking about it and all the rest of it, and I'm thinking to myself, it's all those. I mean, it looks like a game of dominoes.
Yeah, it is, but it feels like a. But the thing is, Robert,
which confuses me because Festool has a domino. So.
But it's actually made me quite a lot of money over the years. So it's not just something that I've just bought for the fun. Yeah, it's genuinely made me money in the workshop. So
all right. So I'll take you up on that offer. I'll come down to your workshop and I'll do so. You'll teach me how to use that, and in return, you can come and cut a roof with me or something like that. Okay, so materials. Let's talk about materials. What materials and timber do you work with?
So it's weird because obviously a lot of the materials I use is MDF, veneers and stuff like that. I've just started getting into a bit more hardwoods, and this is why I want to get the planer fixer. But a lot of it with the wardrobe making, there is a lot of sprayed finishes. Veneer. I think it's more stable. It's suited to what I can use. Like again, if I had bigger machines, I could probably go down the route of building, huge walnut benches and stuff like that. But the type of work I'm doing, it's mainly veneers and sprayed finishes.
Yeah, and I think that like it or lump it, whether it's chipboard material, which is veneer, or whether it's MDF, is stable. Yeah, and it's designed to do exactly that. It's designed to stay flat, provided you don't go cutting one side of it off or anything like that. So I think it's important. People often turn their nose up, don't they, at something which isn't solid. Yeah. If you try to make a shake a door out of solid, it's going to cost you a lot more, and it's likely to go wrong a lot more.
That's
twist,
it.
and move,
Yeah.
and split, especially in some people's houses,
Yeah.
moisture and heat. How do you approach project managing each job you take on?
Well, I've got a wife that's really good at spreadsheets and Excel and stuff like that. So, you know, she's a big part of my business. Everything's organised. That's why probably my business, you know, I'm a lot more relaxed than I should be, because she takes care of a lot of the stuff for me. But, you know, usually it's, you know, design, you know, meet the client, design. I love drawing, and I've mentioned CAD and SketchUp. I use a lot of SketchUp to do all my drawings, which I love, because it's really good for a visual for clients. But also I've managed to do all of my detailed drawings and what I can work off in the workshop. So yeah, every job's different. You know, I'm never building the same thing, so it could vary a bit, but it's usually get the design part right, and all the other parts sort of, you know, flow quite easy.
Yeah, it's a cliche, isn't it, when you say, you know, it's all about the preparation, whether it's preparing for a job or preparing to, you know, take a bank loan or something. You need to be in the right place, and you need to be able to sort of lay out and set out your stall, because otherwise you're going to fall over at some point down the line. So our journey through the trade has its highs and lows, there's no doubt about that. And I know you're in a good place currently, but I mean, this hasn't always been the case. So what are some of the challenges that you've faced more recently?
Look, I think everyone struggled through COVID. That's just the way the world was. Obviously, I'm quite an anxious person. I'm an overthinker and I worry. And during COVID, I was anxious. I hate getting ill. I'm worried about health and stuff like that. So I didn't want to be around people. I found it quite hard because a lot of the construction world was still open for quite a big part of the through COVID. So I was turning up on the site, and I can remember not wanting to be near people. And like sometimes I had to as a big, I was doing 2 big jobs right through 2020, and that was like 2 of my biggest jobs I've ever done in my life. And I can remember just being on site thinking that I don't want to be near people, but I had the pressure to finish these jobs. So it was a real mix of emotion. I can remember waking up most mornings and just wanting to throw up. But I think you learn from it as well. Like I got through it, and like it's only taken till last year when I went out to Germany to Festool, the factory. There was like groups of people, like hundreds of people, and it took me till last year to almost get over that COVID sort of backlash. So I feel like I'm back where I was before COVID hit, which is a great thing. But yeah, it's definitely
has a massive effect.
Oh, massive, yeah. I'm quite open about talking about it.
Imagine how that's made you feel. I mean, even me, I can remember the fear of crowds and all the rest of it. This has been talked up so much. Not only that, it was a real thing. People were dying. Relations, people we knew were dying. It was absolutely horrible. And the fact that you must stay at home, you must not go out, and we did stay at home. But the self-employed tradespeople, there weren't no one until we didn't get furlough. If you were lucky enough, you got a bit of bounce back loan, or you could take a grant from the inland revenue. But historically, as a self-employed person, you tried to mitigate your tax liabilities, and so you were actually not due that much money. We had no choice. We had to go to work, didn't we? And you're right. Once you're on site, you kind of forget after a few hours that you can't be within 2 meters of someone, and the dust is flying around, and it was a horrible time.
And the crazy thing is, I actually took the workshop on January 2020. So I took the workshop and bought all these new machines, as well as having the 2 biggest jobs of my life. It was just like, a bit of a whirlwind, but I'm here to talk about it. So
I mean, is it? I mean, do you feel client pressure at all? Is the clients make? I mean, sometimes the clients can make or break a job for me. They're either super chilled and relaxed and see the troubles and the issues we go through, whether it's weather, whether it's cash flow, whether it's someone letting us down. Does that affect you?
It would definitely. So I feel like I've taught myself over the last sort of year or so that I just lay it out to them as best as I can. I'm a small company. I never really get things done on time. There's always these issues that go on in the workshop. I'm happy to work with you, but you understand if you want something built properly, there may be some slips in, there may be some delays sort of thing. And I'll try and, tell them how I am as a person, before I even start the job. Because if I feel like that client is not going to be on the same page to me, I'll just walk away from the job. And I'm sort of in that position right now where, I'm not saying I'm financially, don't need to work, but I'm in a position where I understand more now. So I'll just pick and choose the jobs that are going to work with me, and they will get a better job in the end.
Yeah, because you're in a better frame of mind. You've done your due diligence. Funny old term. That you've decided that client's for me and that client's not for me. Instead of feeling like you've got to give them a price, you haven't. No. And also, you're managing their expectations. What you're talking about, even by saying I might get it. It might be longer, it might take longer, things may go wrong. People like that because you're telling them what it's going to be. If you say, we're going to be finished by next Tuesday comes and you're only half finished, you've not managed your expectations. And I've always said, and I've said this on this show many times, that you're much better off laying your stall out and being honest.
100%.
And people like that, don't they? Because everyone knows everything goes over time and generally over budget. But the biggest problem we have as tradespeople is swallowing the budget overspend. Yeah, and that's the biggest problem, because we're scared to go back and ask for more, because we might have thought, oh, it's my problem, I've underpriced it, or the materials have gone up. Gary, what do you think the best advice someone in the trade has given you, or something that's really stuck with you?
Well, so the company I was working with before this, I was with them for about 10 years. There were two old guys, they must have been, late 50s, I say old, but late 50s, early 60s, and they'd been there and done it. They had 200 people working through at one time, and their calmness and their, I can remember one of the, Kevin and Dave, and one of, Kevin was the designer, the drawer, stayed in the office more, and Dave was more on site, putting stuff together. So I almost learned both of their, skills, but as well as their sons were both working for them as well. So I had 4 people that I sort of bounced off, all completely different people, and I just learned so much from each one of them. So I've learned the design side, the hand drawings, everything that Kevin was doing. Dave with the confidence of, he had a banter with the clients, he's so particular of what he's done. And the sons are almost like, took on their traits, but they were my generation. So it was just like, I absolutely loved working for them. And obviously it's a shame that I left them, but the only reason why I left, because obviously I had my 2 children, I had twins, and I was driving for 2-3 hours in the morning to Surrey every day and back, and I thought it was going to be the death of me, because I just wanted to fall asleep on the motorway, having two young kids. I just thought I need to, go out on my own. I need to do my own thing. I want to be local, and I did, and it's the best thing I've ever done.
So I think there's a lot to be said for that, and I think that your advice coming through there is obviously to people, try to stay local, because it improves your quality of life. It's far more sustainable. We're burning less fuel. It's going to cost you less money. But I know that people will be listening today thinking, I live here and I'm working 50 miles away, because that's where my client is, or that's where the firm I fit for has sent me. I know it is super frustrating, and I hope one day with technology we can all network and say, I'm not going there because you live right near the job. Why don't you do this and I'll do the job that you're going to do in my area? That would be ideal, I know. Okay, so I know you like to be on every project, okay, but where do you draw the line between sort of being a control freak, if you like, and quality control?
Well, that's why I cut the spraying side to it out, because I think it was the way my eye is. I feel like I see everything. So my joiner mates will laugh what my eye is like, but I feel taking that out of my sort of scope of works just meant I can focus more on the things I can control more. So apart from that, I'm in every step. And the thing is, us 1-man bands, 2-man bands, whatever you want to call it, we're doing 5 or 6 jobs already. We're doing literally the designing, the pricing, drawing, building, fitting, spraying, whatever. We're doing so many, and then we've got the social media side as well, which is editing. It's another little job. So we've got a lot of pressure on us.
And I mean the last category, social media. Okay, that is called social media. It used to be called marketing. It used to be called leaflet drop-in. It's exactly the same thing. And I think you need to do that regardless. It's much more technical now, and again, that has a lot of pressure itself. So talking about pressure and the industry as a whole, what would you say to those questioning their place in our industry?
I think our industry's in good hands. I think there's always going to be recessions. There's always going to be where work dries up. I think before I knew I had this big project lined up for the last 6 months. I probably in the last 6 months had my least amount of inquiries. But in the same time, I sort of fell out of love with Instagram and socials. I just was posting less, and I don't know why. I think we just go through a bit of a phase. But then I'd say the last 2 months, it's skyrocketed back up at inquiries. But also I found my love for posting again. It's just we just go through different phases, don't we? So.
Yeah, it can really drain you, can't it? All aspects of business can drain you, including social media. In fact, social media can be a real. I mean, obviously do it as well, but I should do it more. People tell me you should do it more, but actually, I need a break from it as well. I was on holiday last week, and I didn't touch it, and it was kind of like I did have a peek, but I didn't post, and it was just absolutely lovely. I turned all my notifications off as well. I mean, my missus was like, what's changed? It's kind of like, which is all important. So what about those wanting to start up a business or take on a different aspect of the trade? How did you make that transition from working with those 2 fathers and their sons to Banks Carpentry? How did you actually cross over?
So obviously, like I said, the main thing was to travel for me. But what I did do, which they were happy for me to do, I started doing my own little private projects. I wasn't necessarily just using their workshop to do it, but I was building up a little bit of a portfolio, doing my own things, posting on Facebook, a lot of Facebook stuff, and I'd managed to get a couple of jobs on like you know, like Facebook Marketplace, you know, like these groups. You know, I was working a lot in Walthamstow, which is East London, where I sort of grew up. So I could sort of relate to a lot of the people. So I used to live in the area. So I was starting to get, you know, quite a few jobs there. And they'll post on this Facebook group. And then I can remember watching it to be obsessed with how many people would like it, comment it, sort of thing. And then sometimes you get like 4 likes. Well, not me personally, but the job would get 4 likes. And then sometimes it'd hit and it'd be like 150 likes or whatever. And you'd be like, oh, they're loving this job. And then suddenly I'll get messaged, oh, you just done so-and-so's wardrobe. Could we get a quote? And the adrenaline, the buzz of it was absolutely amazing. And, you know, I was like one of the top joiners, carpenters in Walthamstow for about 2 years, and I felt like a bit of a king walking around. It was absolutely amazing. But I knew I was doing a good job for these people, and it was just nice to be in my area where I grew up and doing all this work for these people.
Where you used to build the tree house.
Exactly that,
where, you know, but it's I think it actually, you know, it's a lot more to it than just being lucky on Facebook groups or Instagram, because you have got an amazing passion for what you do. That obviously comes through. That's why, you know, you're recognised by companies like Festool as well, because I do think you are an absolute quality tradesperson. You love what you do with a passion. I think you really do need to do that as a craftsperson. You embrace it, and sometimes that could be to our detriment, because we talked about overdoing something, not actually earning enough money out of it. But that's just unfortunately how we learn, isn't it? It's how we progress. Just like you're now deciding that customer's not for me. I've had one like you before. You don't fit into my psyche, you know, and that sort of stuff. And I think it's really good. So what do you think about overall skills in our trade? Are we in a good place?
Yeah, like, I think we're in a great place. I think we've touched on AI and stuff like that. There's so many things that AI can do for us. Will actually make our life easier with the drawing side, cutting sheet size, planning. But I think AI is not going to turn up, you know, at 7:30 in the morning in the cold and then dragging a wardrobe upstairs. And, you know, I think there's always going to be room for us, you know, building furniture, to be fair.
And of course it sounds quite glamorous, doesn't it, to be in the position you're in, but you do have to go out in the cold and drag wardrobes upstairs. They get damaged at that point as well, and you're back down to stress and back down the workshop, and you sometimes fit something and a client says, I don't like that. No matter how good you are, someone will see something that really? Oh dear. So what kind of route into the trade would you recommend to a novice or young person?
I think straight away you need to like enjoy it, sort of thing. This point is going into the trade if you're not really enjoying it. I'm not saying that plumbers don't enjoy scooping out whatever out of a toilet, but you know there is, you know, an element of plumbing where you're doing these beautiful pipe work and stuff like that. So everything's in the trade has got its own, you know, beautiful element to it, sort of thing. So, you know, I would say find something you like, you know, try a few different things in that sort of category. You know, it's just there's so many different routes.
And I'm just hoping that, you know, the education system can start creeping back towards some sort of practical stuff. I know that they do design technology and things like that, which I don't quite understand. We did woodwork, metalwork, and all that sort of stuff, and build tree houses and go-karts and that sort of stuff. And I think that all of those things gave you a sign of idea there was something you made with wood. It wasn't just, you know, someone else does that. Because a lot of young people think, someone else does that. My dad doesn't do that. Someone else does that. And they look at other career paths. And I think that then, like you say, one of your workers is how old, and when did he start?
Well, he's 42, which I like to remind him, and he started 3 or 4 years ago.
What was he before?
So he was like a bar manager, so he was in that sort of industry.
But he probably never knew as a youngster, but he really would have loved this career if he'd have known about it when he was younger. This is kind of why I'm thinking it's a shame that the education focuses so much on academia instead of the fact that vocational training is key, especially for a fair proportion of people, children or young people who can't actually concentrate, or they're not that fussed about O levels, A levels, or whatever it is at the moment. So what's next for you and your work?
So I think we spoke about the whole influencer sort of thing, and I'm not saying I'm an influencer, but I like to influence my knowledge. So I've got a couple of Instagram channels. I've got my Banks workshop, which is a Patreon. I've got probably 100 or so members on there, and I like to put a lot of my attention into that, which is going great. I've got a WhatsApp group, you know, where I'm constantly posting every single day of what I'm building, all the problems that come with it, you know, because I don't necessarily put that on my main social media because the clients are probably be asking, did that go wrong?
Well, and also, 100 people you can manage. 50,000 people you put on something which is, you know, very brilliant, to be honest and open. But the thing is, you're going to get so many comments, you can't deal with them. If you don't deal with them, you upset people. If you upset people, they start bad mouthing you, regardlessly. So you're right, you need to share your knowledge. I think that's a lovely thing. That's my main aim in life. I'm 54. Ugh. I'm 54, and by the time I retire, if I'm able to retire, money-wise, I will get rid of all my knowledge and carry on getting rid of it. Because I think that we all have a duty in life to share our knowledge, because someone's taught you, someone's taught me, and I think that that's a really good thing as well. So, Gary, talking about social media, talking about being an influencer, which I know you don't like, but whether you like it or not, you are. How can people connect with you online and check your content?
Well, so yeah, I've got my main Banks Carpentry channel, which is on Instagram. I've got my Banks Workshop channel, which you're more welcome to try it out. You can try it out for a month and disappear if you don't like it, which I absolutely love at the moment. And we're on TikTok. We're giving TikTok a go, which is going really well. It's a bit more, not gimmicky, but it's just a bit more fun. And then we're just about to start YouTube as well, which is going to be a lot more in depth, you know, with the tools and a lot more high definition videos. So
brilliant.
Yeah, plenty.
Brilliant. So people have got every you've got every base covered for people. That's brilliant. Thanks, Gary. It has been absolutely great to have you here at Festool in Bury St Edmunds.